This is CBC Vancouver News.
A daytime shooting in the Downtown Eastside forces closures for hours. Also,
that's an astronomically high tax increase that taxpayers in Surrey just can't afford right now.
Surrey proposes a hefty tax hike for policing. Why the jump and the reaction? And
shouldn't have to worry about her, and now I do, and that's not fair.
why a group in Nanaimo is calling for changes after a change room incident. Good evening, and thanks for joining us. I'm Baneet Braich. Leanne is away tonight. Vancouver police say a suspect has been arrested and a victim taken to hospital after a daylight shooting in the city's Downtown Eastside today. The shooting sent a 31-year-old victim to hospital with multiple gunshot wounds. Police say he is expected to survive and that officers were working on East Hastings Street around 2:30 p.m. when shots were fired. VPD says the victim was known to police but does not live in the Downtown East Side. Other officers tracked the suspect that fled from East Hastings to Chinatown, where he was arrested moments later. Police say he is in his 30s and originally from Alberta. The area was closed off for much of the afternoon and evening, and TransLink reported delays and implemented detours due to the incident, and the investigation is ongoing. Now to Surrey, where there is a growing reaction on a proposed double-digit tax increase. The City of Surrey has released its draft 5-year budget Saturday, and it proposes a property tax increase of 17.5%. And it's largely to do with the transition of its police force. Michelle Morton has more on the reaction from the city.
It is certainly not a budget that I am happy to deliver, but it is a budget that we have to deliver.
In that proposed budget is a 9.5% property tax increase to cover policing transition costs. Now, the budget comes weeks after officials wanted more information before deciding on the city's plan to go back to the RCMP. But the proposed budget has its critics. One councillor says taxpayers should not be footing a bill with so many unknowns.
I'm very concerned about what is in the transition costs or the reversal back to the RCMP, because quite frankly, there's so many assumptions that have been made. We don't have a clear understanding of what these numbers are, and I really believe that we should have done that first.
The city is also proposing a 7% general property tax increase and a 1% roads and traffic levy. The city says the total proposed tax increase of 17.5% would mean the average homeowner would have to pay more than $400 a year.
We all know that housing is one of those big costs in the Lower Mainland that are keeping families up at night worrying. And by raising the property taxes so much for those families, the City of Surrey is just making that situation even worse.
Meanwhile, the Surrey Board of Trade said it's not clear from the proposed budget how much businesses would have to pay for their property taxes if given the green light.
In the face of great inflationary pressures to businesses, labor shortages, so many other challenges that businesses are facing, this is just another hit to the bottom line that really remains uncertain right now for the business community.
A Public Finance Committee meeting will be held early next month to consider the proposed budget and tax increase. Residents can also share their comments in person. Michelle Morton, CBC News, Surrey.
After more than a century, a totem pole taken from an Indigenous British Columbian village is coming home. The CBC's Susanna De Silva is in Bella Coola, BC for the return.
There will be a big celebration inside of this school with much of the community coming out to welcome the totem pole back home. Now, it is already inside, but the big unveiling will happen in the afternoon. There will be speeches and dancing and singing to welcome it. And for many people here, the majority of people here, it will be the very first time they see it in person. Some have seen it in photos, but it will be the first time they are able to see it in person. Now, it did arrive in town on Thursday with a large convoy of community members that followed it the 1,000 1,000-kilometer trek it has made since it was removed from the Royal BC Museum in Victoria. Of course, it had been there for decades after being taken from here back in 1913. It was carved back in the 1850s. Now, for many here, there is a sense of excitement, a sense of joy to be able to reclaim this treasured possession back here into the community. And for many people, it is, they say, a start to reclaim their culture, their traditions, their heritage. We spoke to a carver here who says when he was growing up, there were very few people who were carving, who knew how to carve totem poles, but he says that is slowly starting to come back. There are young people learning the tradition now, and he is hopeful that this event tomorrow and bringing this piece back home will also boost that as young people want to connect with their culture and their heritage. Now, it will remain here at the school for the next year, another opportunity for children to see it and begin to understand and learn about it. But it will, after a year, go back to the original spot where it had been standing in the village, the original village of the Newhawk people before they were forced out here to Bella Coola, and there it will then remain. Susanna da Silva, CBC News, Bella Coola.
One Nanaimo-based mother is pushing for action after a change room incident at the Nanaimo Aquatic Centre earlier this month. As Claire Palmer reports, supporters rallied to have their voices heard.
Dozens rallied today in support for this mother. Janaea Wright says that earlier this month, a person wearing a wig in a women's change room attempted to peek under the stall at her daughter. Since then, she's created Make Me Safe, a group she says is dedicated to the safety of women and children against predators.
Yeah, it's hard. It's scary. You know what I mean? She's 9. She's got her little locker token. She should be able to go in and have that little piece of independence and get herself changed. And I shouldn't have to worry about her. And now I do. And that's not fair.
Some are raising concerns about the response to the movement. Trans rights activists say the response to the incident has incited transphobia.
But yeah, I'm glad that we spoke because being able to know that what her and her movement are doing is actually going to affect us positively and not negatively. I'm really glad that we found that out because I was really worried.
It would just be really nice for people in Nanaimo to know that pedophilia and transness are completely isolated items.
Wright says she's glad she had the chance to speak with the activists.
You know what? It went fantastic. I think that we definitely, again, I was able to clarify some things. We were able to come to the middle ground. I was able to explain to them that what I'm trying to do is also going to create safety for them and their community.
Wright is now calling on more to be done to protect people in vulnerable spaces, such as having more liaison officers.
I have a petition out on change.org. I'm hoping right now to get a Make Me Safe liaison at all of the vulnerable spaces, high schools, pool facilities where women are changing, and have somebody there that will be able to advocate.
Extra precaution, she feels, can go a long way, providing protection for those most vulnerable. Claire Palmer, CBC News, Nanaimo.
After a series of warnings about dangerous snow conditions in BC this weekend, a successful rescue in the backcountry yesterday. 5 skiers had to be brought back to Big White Resort by search and rescue crews after losing their way on the resort's backside.
The problem is these guys were unprepared, so they didn't have the essentials, right? A beacon, probe, and shovel, which you absolutely must have when you're outside of a controlled area. And Big White controls for avalanches inbounds, but on the backside in the eco reserve, they don't. So these people didn't have that, and obviously they didn't have a GPS, or they wouldn't have, spent 4 hours out there wandering around.
The skiers were rescued by volunteers on snowmobiles a few hours after getting lost. Forecasters say this year's snowpack is to blame for the dangerous conditions. People heading into the backcountry are urged to check the avalanche forecast and make cautious decisions about which terrain to explore. Officials say an avalanche transceiver, snow probe, and snow shovel are essential. To Abbotsford now, where the new courthouse has been found to have copper and lead in its water. BC's Ministry of Citizen Services says courthouse staff first complained about the water's taste and green residue being left in glasses in January last year. It says tests showed the levels are modestly more than those permitted by regulatory standards. The ministry says at the time, the building operator took steps to deal with the issue, such as flushing the building, providing bottled water, and doing more water assessments. The ministry says it will be contracting the consulting firm for more testing this summer. A dispute between residents and disc golfers in North Vancouver has landed in front of City Council. There have been complaints about overcrowding, public urination, and verbal abuse in Eastview Park, especially since the park gained popularity during the pandemic. Yasmin Ranea has more on the future of the park.
A little bit to the right.
Chris Vance loves playing disc golf at Eastview Park with his family.
Stay in the air. Stay in the air.
Too far. Actually, too far.
It's a simple game requiring minimal equipment, and you can play all year round with friends and family.
Yeah. Look at the flight on that.
But not everyone is a fan. For years, some residents have complained about unruly behavior by some players, and they say it's gotten worse since the sport gained popularity during the pandemic.
Yeah, I think we've heard about drinking in the park. We've heard about smoking of cannabis in the park. We've heard about public urination and defecation.
There are also reports of people and their dogs being hit with discs. A few residents recently brought their concerns to city councillors.
It's not a case that if an accident's going to happen and a child get injured, it's when it's going to happen. And you guys have the power to stop that happening.
But some players say the conflict is being blown out of proportion.
We do have a couple of blind corners. Majority of people are really well aware of that, and when they throw, they're cognizant and they're looking. Nobody wants to hit anybody. A disc will hurt.
Councillors have passed a motion for city staff to look at solutions that would address the problem, including possibly relocating the disc golf course to another park. Chris Vance says closing this location would be disappointing since it's the perfect size for his kiddos.
The kids can see the basket from the tee pad, so it's so much more fun for them. This, to me, is the family park.
City staff will present council with a report outlining options for the park in the coming weeks. But for now, disc golf lives on. Yasmin Ranea, CBC News, North Vancouver.
One of just 4 endangered spotted owls known to be in the wild in BC is recovering from an injury after being found along some train tracks. The injured bird was released last August, along with 2 others in forests near the Spuzum First Nation, about 200 kilometers northeast of Vancouver. Staff at the Northern Spotted Owl Breeding Program believe the owl may have collided with a passing train. They say he could be released if his wings heal properly. Soon, people will have to pay up to share their Netflix passwords. With inflation and interest rates already forcing people to think twice about how they spend their money, one counselor shares how to tell your Netflix password sharing pals it's over.
It comes up a lot. Because it's so uncomfortable, I feel like I hear it maybe multiple times a week from different clients. But why? You just stick to it. Hey, this is not for me right now. Hey, I don't want to do this right now. Hey, I can't afford this. Whatever it is, you get to decide what your answer is going to be or your reasoning, and then stick to it.
Sidhu also suggests writing out what you want to say or send it in a message beforehand to ensure the tone of your message. And starting this month, Netflix will start charging customers $7.99 a month for additional households wanting to use the same account. And as Family Day approaches, Environment Canada has issued wind and snow warnings for parts of the province. Strong gustly winds are expected for Greater Victoria and West Vancouver Island tomorrow. And there's a snowfall warning for places like the Lakes District, Prince George, and Vanderhoof. And these places could see between 10 to 20 centimeters of snow. And a winter storm warning is in effect for the Coquihalla Highway between Hope and Merritt as well. Dismissing the harms of residential schools, the worries of residential school denialism. That story is next. Advocates say they're witnessing an alarming volume of material which is questioning or minimizing harm done at Canada's former residential schools. And some are calling it hate speech. The CBC's Olivia Stefanovic has the story.
Dear Dr. Supernant,
ever since the discovery of possible unmarked graves near former residential schools, Métis archaeologist Keisha Supernant has been targeted with letters like this.
They shouldn't even be classified as a burial site because I can guarantee you the radar is not accurate.
She calls those messages residential school denialism, twisting and dismissing facts about the institutions created to assimilate First Nations, Inuit, and Métis children.
I'm already dealing with the emotional toil of spending my time walking over potential graves of children who went missing. And then for that to be called into question makes the work a lot more challenging.
There's a difference between free speech and hate speech.
This MP already got the House of Commons to acknowledge genocide happened at residential schools. Now she wants Parliament to legislate denialism as hate speech.
That kind of speech is violent and re-traumatizes those who attended residential school, who constantly have their experience of genocide left up for debate.
Well, this is totalitarianism.
Frances Widowson was fired as a professor in part for her skepticism that residential school burial sites exist.
I could be misguided and wrong, but the answer to that is not to make what I'm saying illegal.
But author Michelle Good, who wrote an award-winning book about residential schools, says Ottawa needs to take this new threat of denialism seriously.
My mother watched her friend Lily hemorrhage to death from tuberculosis at the Onion Lake Residential School. We've known this, and so to have people respond to our lived experience as though it never happened is devastating.
Good says unless that rhetoric is outlawed, the country will never be able to achieve meaningful reconciliation. Olivia Stefanovic, CBC News, Ottawa.
The true toll of Ukraine's war is unknown. Tens, perhaps even hundreds of thousands have been killed or wounded, and the impact on society beyond measure. The CBC's Margaret Evans takes a look at this, the experience of one small city in western Ukraine, and a warning, this story has some disturbing images.
One more freshly dug grave awaiting the body of a Ukrainian soldier, this time in the city of Kopychinsi. Towns in the west, far from the front lines, aren't spared the burden of loss. Ivan Polansky was 23, a soldier with an artillery unit. His brother, Dmytro, also a soldier, was given leave to attend the funeral. He was the best person I have ever known. I've never seen such a warrior, he says, twice decorated for bravery. Polansky signed up 3 days after the Russian invasion. The city back then already determined to be an important part of the war effort, supporting the army and displaced civilians. A year later, the mayor, Bogdan Kalichauvi, says they're no less determined.
We don't have to wait for the future, we have to work towards the future.
With the help of his wife, Maria Tuzik, a Canadian, they've created a humanitarian hub. They also want to better integrate the displaced into the community.
There's still a lot of vulnerability in the country. There's still a lot of people that are struggling, and we want to help though.
The town has opened its doors to businesses from the east seeking to relocate in the west. It helps Kopychinsi too, of course, by creating jobs. This warehouse is now home to furniture makers from Kharkiv. They had to rescue their high-tech equipment from the battlefront. We've gone through a lot, says Serhiy Khromov. We were hoping the war would end much earlier, but the end isn't in sight yet. A realization for Tuzik, too, when her parents sent her a plane ticket to Toronto, asking her to visit.
I didn't know how tired and how exhausted I was until I was there, and there was not like everything was happening around me.
She now realizes war is not a sprint, she says, but a marathon. Margaret Evans, CBC News, Kopychinsi.
Well, the rising cost of living is leading to another disheartening issue, with more and more pets either being surrendered to shelters or simply abandoned. Deanna Sumanak-Johnson reports.
This pristine conservation area can become a terrifying place for a pet abandoned by its owner. Last year, 18 pets were found here, up from just 2 in 2019.
It's really hard for a domestic animal to survive in the wilderness. They often are found cold, wet, hungry, hypothermic, starving.
During the pandemic, shelters saw a rise in animal adoptions. But now, with prices soaring for human and pet food, the costs might just be too much for some families to handle.
So they're telling us that they either can't afford to take care of the pet anymore, or that the pet's having some sort of behavioral issue that they're not able to manage.
Another sign that people are strapped for cash, it's taking longer than usual to find new homes for animals like King here.
So this is King. He's been with us for about a year and a half now. So we're really looking for a home for him. He's a great dog. Beautiful. He's 8 years old.
In British Columbia, they're noticing another troubling trend involving breeders.
Yes, there was a huge market during the COVID pandemic for puppies. And now that market is kind of dried up, and we're seeing a lot of people who have a surplus of puppies that they actually can't care for. So we're trying to help as best as we can.
In an attempt to boost adoptions, that organization has halved its adoption fees for the month of February. And this Brampton, Ontario shelter says to call them for advice or even check out their pet food pantry if you're having trouble caring for your animal. Short-term solutions by organizations who know that when times get tough for people, they can be dire for animals. Deanna Sumanak-Johnson, CBC News, Brampton, Ontario.
2 weeks after the earthquake, rescue efforts in Turkey began winding down today. The head of Turkey's emergency management agency said that by tonight, most of the search and rescue efforts would be over. Neither Turkey nor Syria has offered an estimate of how many may still be missing. The number of dead today was approaching 47,000. The World Health Organization puts the number of people needing humanitarian aid at 26 million. And here's a live shot of downtown Vancouver looking towards the North Shore. I'll have your full forecast next. All right, it's time for your BC-wide weather forecast. We saw rain and clouds in Vancouver today. You can expect more of that, but let's take a look at your current temperatures. We're at 7 degrees in YVR, 6 degrees in Pitt Meadows, Abbotsford also 7 degrees, Nanaimo at 4 degrees. Take a look at tomorrow. A snowfall warning has been issued for Prince George. Environment Canada says expect 10 to 20 centimeters of snow. Williams Lake will also see snow. Periods of rain in Kelowna with a high of 7 degrees. On the island, periods of rain for Victoria and windy by the water, so strong winds which will reach up to 70 kilometers an hour tomorrow. Now to your 5-day forecast. We got a variety of weather hitting Metro Vancouver this week. Rain on Monday and Tuesday. You'll see flurries on Wednesday. Thursday and Friday will be cloudy and cold. You'll see 2 degrees on Thursday and -2 degrees on Friday. So, you know, it's a variety of weather, but best to bundle up this coming week. And that is your late news for Sunday, February 19th. Thanks for watching. And for news at any hour, you can always visit our website at cbc.ca/BC. Good night.